So, when you were tracking, well, I mean, not tracking anything and was focusing on gentle nutrition for that whole month, how different was your life during that month compared to like the years before when you struggled with disordered eating and orthorexic habits?
It was more connected, and I'm going to say connected in terms of with myself and my body. So instead of, for example, living in the future as I'm sitting down and planning out all these meals and when I'm going to have them and how much I'm going to have of each thing, where it was always very future oriented, I was able to be more connected and present with myself when I was eating and sitting down at a meal, and I could actually make decisions in the moment. And quite frankly, I wasn't really focusing that much on gentle nutrition at the time. It was just like, what do I like to eat? Like what tastes good to me? What doesn't taste good? I'm not going to just eat this thing because it's quote unquote healthy. I'm going to eat it because I enjoy it. Or I remember I piled on all the desserts I thought were, off limits, and I would walk past them every day and I'd be like, oh, I can't have this. And so I was like, you know what? What if we actually ate a bunch of desserts and actually figured out which ones we liked? Because some of them were just kind of sweet, and I didn't like that. I don't actually have that much of a sweet tooth. And some of them were really good, and some of them were not as good as I thought. And so it was really a process of, okay, let's be present with the food that's here now, instead of thinking, in the future of here's what I'm going to eat to, make up for this, or here's what I'm going to eat to be perfect, or being in the past and saying, well, I ate this, so now I have to, again,
Mm.
going through that like good, bad kind of dichotomy. So I was much more present with the food that was there. I was much more present with myself and my emotions. So if I felt like I was, upset or stressed or distracted, I was able to be with those emotions. And it didn't mean that, I didn't emotionally eat. Eating can be a tool to emotionally regulate and feel good or whatever. But it also meant that I was able to say, hey, can I add some other tools into my self care toolbox? So when I am stressed, would it be helpful to take some deep breaths and like take a moment to meditate? Would it be helpful to go on a walk and just like jam out to some music? Would it be helpful to phone a friend or like call a friend if I was stressed out, particularly about an exam coming up? Can I get some help and address it in that way? So it felt like I was more present with myself and my emotions, but also I was more connected with other people. That was by far the biggest difference. Is I felt like when I did have my binging moments, I would obviously do them in private. It would feel very shameful. I would not tell anyone about it. And that privacy, while it did feel safe, it did not help me feel connected to other people. So instead of, if I was like, oh, I really want to eat this thing, and then my brain would be like, oh, it's not good to eat that, I would make a plan to go with a friend and say, hey, I really want some burgers and fries. Do you want to go grab some at this restaurant? And now instead of isolation and shame and privacy, I would then be able to connect with someone, have some good food, actually be present and enjoy what I was eating, and or be honest and be like, this burger wasn't the best thing ever, but that's fine. Now we know this restaurant isn't that great for burgers, and we could move on. It wasn't this thing that now I had to like even out the scales, or oh my gosh, I've eaten too much. And now it was entering an era of trusting that my body knew what to do, and I did not have to micromanage it. Of
Mm.
course, it's great to be educated, but by that point, honestly, my eating disorder was very educated about what foods have what. And so I didn't need more information. I needed to trust my body more and say, hey, it actually knows what it needs. There are usually times that if I am extra hungry and I'm like, oh, I don't know why, it knows what it needs. I likely need some more food, because there are so many factors that go into, for example, if I've had a more active day without realizing it, if I and in my menstrual cycle, if I'm like right before my period or during my period, I do get more hungry. So there are a variety of factors that might impact how much like energy I need for the day. Or there are days where I was studying a lot, and so your brain does use energy when you are studying a lot and focusing on things. So being able to trust my body instead of ignoring those cues or thinking that they're wrong, like, oh, this is, I shouldn't be feeling this way, or there's something wrong with me if I feel this way. It was a slow process. And I'm not saying that this all happened in a month and it was totally fine, but it was a slow first step in that process of switching from that external, like who can tell me the right way to eat or what I should be doing at all times, to more of an internal focus of like, what is my body telling me? Let's figure this out. Can I trust it and actually respond to it? That's the other thing. We have to listen to our bodies and actually respond to them. Sometimes we hear it and we're like, whatever, I'm going to ignore you. Listening to it and also responding by, feeding ourselves or drinking some water, or going outside, or whatever I needed at the moment, or just laying down on the couch. Sometimes that is exactly what my body needs because it is
Mm,
depleted. Yeah.
absolutely. And during that moment, or shall I say that season, if that's the right word, that season of like growth, if that's the right word again,
Mhm.
did you battle with any thoughts of, oh, I feel like if I'm not tracking some my calories, I feel like I'm just gonna gain weight. Like, did you have that internal struggle?
Yeah. So it's like you mentioned, this was 8 years ago. I'm
Longer
positive
than we thought.
I had those thoughts of like, what if I could regain some control? And honestly,
Mm,
and I know a lot of people in this, when you are healing a relationship with food, I like to say that our bodies may gain weight, lose weight, or stay the same. That is a morally neutral experience based on what your previous habits were. Um, that is not the thing that we are necessarily tracking or paying attention to. It's your mental health, it's your physical health, your blood work, things like that that are going to be more important along the road. But I don't know. I feel like it was more challenging when my life changed, my kind of work life changed in 2020, because I was fully in person, teaching clients and classes, which involved a lot of running around. I wasn't tracking my food, and I was also not tracking my energy expenditure. So I am sure that I was walking a lot. I was on my feet all the time. It's a very active job. Um, and people would ask me like, what are you doing to stay the way that your body looks right now? And I'm like, I don't know. I am just struggling to find time in the day to feed myself enough. And so I was likely under eating. And then fast forward to 2020, where at the drop of a hat, we completely switched to virtual. I basically had a desk job. And
mm,
during the next like year or so, combined with the intense stress of that year, the pandemic, as well as work changes, life changes, all the things, probably gained like 40 pounds during that time. And by that point, I've had, if you do the math, at a good 4 years of healing my relationship with food and my body image and movement, and I felt pretty confident. But it also brought up, this weight change that I had did bring up a lot of feelings of like, whoa, am I doing something wrong? Whoa, like,
mm,
do we need to handle this somehow? Like, and I think that's a very normal or common experience when we do feel like our body is changing and we're not exactly sure why, or we feel like if my weight is trending upwards, if I'm gaining weight, then I need to do something to fix it, or I need to do something to stop it, because that just means that I'm just going to keep gaining and gaining and gaining, and there's no end in sight, and it's out of control. And the way that we regain control is coming back to those restrictive habits, back to slashing the calories and increasing our exercise intake, because that's the tool we've been given, or the mantra we've been told is calories in, calories out. That's pretty much it. End of story. Have a good time. Long story short, my weight did end up just kind of, I gained weight and then I started to level out again. I'm the heaviest I've been, but I'm also the strongest I've ever been.
mm.
I feel good. My blood works fine. And it is kind of a nice reminder to myself that, again, I can trust my body. I don't have to micromanage it. It's not a problem to be solved. Um, and yes, so yeah, it weirdly enough did not have as intense body image stuff come up during that time, kind of that early recovery time. And then, I was kind of blasé and thinking, I'm totally done with my recovery. I feel really good about this. And, then with that weight gain, of course, things came up because culturally we have been raised that being fat is bad, being in a bigger body is bad, gaining weight is a horrible thing, and you're fully in control of it at all times, and you should be in control of it. And if it's going up, you need to take it back down again. So even though I had been in recovery and had been, really working on that, it still made some thoughts and feelings come up for me. And I ended up going back to therapy because I was like, I need some more support here. Um, but at the same time, when I also got COVID in like November of 2020. So my cardiorespiratory fitness was really
Mm.
rough. Like I remember walking up the stairs and it felt like I was climbing Mount Everest. It was not a great time. And so I tried to like be my own little non-diet trainer in my head and I'd be like, if I was my own client, what would I tell myself? And it was like, let's start nice and slow, like gentle movement. Let's figure out ways to, again, break up the day because I was still largely virtual throughout 2021 or so. Now I'm at a hybrid schedule where I'm 2 days in person and then 3 days working from home. And so it was like, okay, like I think this is kind of where my work-life balance is. And there are some days that might be more sedentary and some days that are more active. And so how can I incorporate movement in a way that's going to feel good? Because my joints do hurt. Like I get stiff, I get moody. I don't like just being in one room, all day. That just drives me nuts. So it was, what are the behaviors? What actions can I take that have still nothing to do with losing weight or, then going to this pendulum swing of like, now we need to do all this really intense stuff that I know is not going to be sustainable and it's certainly not going to be good for my recovery. What could I do that's small and it's still going to make a difference? And I know a lot of the times my brain will be like, well, if it's small, it's not going to make a difference, but I have to almost run an experiment with myself. I have to put on my little science goggles and run an experiment and be like, what if, we did this small thing? What if I think at the time my morning routine was non-existent. I think I rolled out of bed right into like virtual sessions and I was just, oh, what's happening? And I was like, what if we rolled out of bed? We can still roll out of bed, but we had something to eat before we go into client sessions. And so it was like this very small, okay, I don't even care if it's a well-rounded breakfast. We're going to eat something. Okay. And then after a few months of that, it's like, okay, now can we make it a little bit more like well-rounded? Can we have a protein, fat, carb, maybe throw in some spinach on this bagel? Great. Awesome. And again, it has to taste good. Otherwise, I'm not going to want to do it.
Mm.
And it was a slow process of like reclaiming these behaviors that felt like they filled up my cup instead of draining me, instead of feeling really overwhelming or something that wasn't sustainable for more than like a few weeks or even days at a time. And yeah, it took some experimenting. And I think becoming my own little client was really helpful. Therapy helped tremendously. Again, like there are some times that we need to address it with a professional. There's not always like, oh, I'm just gonna drink water and like think positive thoughts and it'll all be fine. Sometimes we do need more support. And yeah, lo and behold, it definitely got better. And I still continue to not really focus on my weight. Honestly have shifted more to like a performance aspect where I like to strength train. That is my joyful movement. It's so
Mm.
great. And that's what I like to do. But yeah, hopefully that's helpful for anyone that's listening if you are going through that, whether you're, gaining weight, maintaining weight, or losing weight. Ultimately being able to bring it back to that is, my body is going to be in flux for a lot of reasons. Can I bring it back to what am I doing? What is actually sort of in my control and how can I use this to take care of myself rather than punish myself?